Taoiseach, if well-being and quality of life are to mean anything, then they have to surely mean that people have some security about the place that they live. I don't see how you can possibly have either of those things if you don't have security about where you live. Your decision to lift the eviction ban means 750,000 people approximately in rented accommodation in this country have now confirmed that they will have no security. And many of them will face eviction into homelessness and have nowhere to go. But earlier on, Deputy Smith made the comparison with Europe, where if a landlord is selling or if there's no fault, that we believe, like in those other countries, people should not be evicted. And you said, oh, well, that would cause us problems because we can't do it retrospectively. So I just want to draw that out from you. Are you then saying that from now on, you're in favour of that principle? That we maybe have to deal with a legacy, but that in future, we're going to give security to all tenants in private rental sector, and that you're going to legislate to that effect? I doubt that you're saying that, but that was the implication one could draw. Now, that's what should happen, because why is it anybody in private rented accommodation should not enjoy the security and well-being of knowing that if they do nothing wrong and pay their rent, that they could still end up being evicted and not enjoy the security that other people in society enjoy? Please explain that to me, because currently they don't have it. And the Damocles sword of potential homelessness is constantly hovering over their head, and for many, that sword will fall in the next few months.
Thanks, Deputy, for your questions. Just in relation to the wider piece about the use of wellbeing indicators, which I'm very much in favour of, I think in fairness to this government and all previous governments, including ones that I didn't support, they've always taken into account more than economic growth and GDP and public finances. The nature of politics is that you take into account many different indicators in making your decisions, whether it's unemployment or inflation and the cost of living, home ownership, which is the ultimate form of housing security in my view, safety, crime rates, poverty rates, all of those things have always been taken into account by governments in making their decisions, or at least in my experience. Today we will publish the new National Action Plan on Racism, and that'll be published at 4 o'clock this evening. Minister Gorman's done a huge amount of work on it, and I think it is very positive. And deputies will have a chance to go through that during the course of the day. I think Deputy Boyd Barrett asked me whether we could pass a law prospectively applying to new rental properties, that evictions could only happen on a no-fault basis, and my understanding is that could be done. I don't think you could do it retrospectively, applying it to people who rented out properties on a different basis. But if you were to say to people from now on, if you're renting out a property now for the first time, you must accept that you may never be able to gain possession of it, provided that the person pays their rent. You could potentially do that, but that is a very different model of a private rental sector. It is the kind of model that exists in some European countries, where almost all landlords are professional landlords, institutional landlords. You don't have the kind of small landlord or mom and pop landlords like we have here. But there will be consequences. One thing we've done already is to make all new tenancies of indefinite duration. We've already made that change. If you were to say that all future tenancies were going to be no-fault tenancies, that would bring about a major change in the private rental sector, but it would have other consequences. I think you'd probably see an increase in vacancy rates, because think of the person, for example, who is going abroad for a year or two, and that's pretty common. Of course, they would never rent out their apartment or their house if they were never able to recover it, unless the person didn't pay their rent. You would probably see people who currently might buy a property for their kid to live in when they become a student in college, buying it and leaving it vacant, because that was the purpose for them buying it. And you may even see people willing to just pay the vacancy tax rather than not be able to move back into their own house after, because they have to go away for 6 months or 2 years. So you'd have to think of all those kind of knock-on consequences that would arise from a pretty fundamental change like that. But I'm sure it could only be done prospectively. I don't think you could say to somebody who bought a house to live in 10 years ago, 15 years ago, are renting it out for a particular period, that they could never regain possession of that unless the tenant didn't pay their rent or paid any social favour. I don't see how that would either be right or be constitutional. Just on the issue of mental health, I think absolutely mental health is a huge part of well-being, and we'll have to see how we could integrate into this framework. I did see a survey the other day which said that Ireland was the 14th happiest country in the world, which isn't bad out of 200 countries, but obviously I'd like us to be in the top 10. We're in the top 10 in almost everything, believe it or not, in the world, certainly the top 20. But obviously different surveys work in different ways and use different methodologies. Just in relation to the documents that Deputy Bashik raised, I'll have to check up on that. I don't actually know where we are in terms of that, but I will certainly do that. And then just finally, I was asked about how it works into the budget. We have committed to featuring the wellbeing framework at relevant points in the budget cycle. So it was a theme in the National Economic Dialogue last year, and the analysis also featured in the summary economic statement in budget day documentation. It's intended that this will be an annual contribution to the budget, which will feed into a broader discussion of the impacts of budgetary decisions. For example, this approach provides evidence for the identification of potential priorities, highlighting progress or lack thereof across a wide range of policy issues that are important for longer-term quality of life and sustainability over the medium term. Work is also ongoing in the Department of Public Expenditure, NDP Delivery and Reform, to further embed a wellbeing perspective into expenditure decisions. The Department has published a working paper that locates wellbeing within the context of the budgetary timeline, and in particular proposes an approach that provides a cross-governmental description of current and capital expenditure in terms of wellbeing dimensions. I look forward to the impact that the framework will provide to the budget every year as we use it to look beyond just economic indicators to assess how government policies are best serving the people of Ireland.